In 1994, The Santa Clause hit theatres just in time for Christmas, where Tim Allen plays toy salesman Scott Calvin, a man more committed to his job than fixing his dysfunctional relationships, particularly with his son Charlie. And one night after hearing footsteps on the roof, Scott rushes out of his home to see a startled Santa on his roof, where Santa falls off the roof and appears to die, where Scott does what anyone else would do. No, not call 911, but put on the Santa suit, where the sleigh takes Scott and Charlie to Santa's workshop in the North Pole, where Scott is informed that because he put on Santa's suit, he is now legally bound by contract to be the next Santa Claus, where Scott horrifically starts to physically change and turn into the holly jolly big man himself, all while everyone around him thinks that he's having a breakdown. Yeah, this film is for kids, honest. But the big question is, will Scott embrace his new Santa Claus responsibilities? Despite being a movie that you don't want to look too deeply into, as it leaves many morality questions like, is it right to force someone to physically transform against their will? The Santa Clause is still a fun family Christmas movie from the 90s, and one that's bound to still bring festive cheer to all those who grew up watching it. So, we're going to look into 10 things that you didn't know about the Santa Clause. Let's do it. Number 10, the original face of Scott Calvin. The Santa Clause was written by writing duo Leo Benvenuti and Steve Rudnick, whom had previously written for television and would go on to write fellow 90s family favourite Space Jam. And when they wrote the story of a modern-day salesman transforming into Santa Claus, it was originally written with Bill Murray in mind to play the character. But Murray turned down the role, thinking that it wasn't his type of humour. But he did, however, go on to star in their other movie, Space Jam. Chevy Chase was also approached for the role, but couldn't commit due to filming schedule conflicts, in which the following year he starred in fellow Disney movie, Man of the House. So the production turned to Tim Allen, who was very popular at the time thanks to his hit sitcom Home Improvement. And just like that, Tim Allen joined forces with Disney, where he would go on to famously provide the voice for Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story. Number 9, original title. The title, The Santa Clause, is a very clever play on words, as Tim Allen is the Santa Claus, but the word clause is spelt with an E, meaning it's a legal clause, thus the Scott character's binding obligation to now be Santa. It's a great title, 10 out of 10, perfect name for the movie, no problem here. However, originally the movie was going to be called Such a Clatter. Yeah, not exactly the most memorable or standout title really, is it? I mean, Such a Clatter doesn't sound like a movie about a man who transforms into Santa, but something your grandparents say when the TV is on too loud. Now, don't get me wrong, the title is a reference to a scene in the movie where Scott's son can hear something on the roof, which is Santa, but still, not a very memorable title. So thankfully the title was changed to the one that we all know and love. Number 8, The Santa Clause started a 3-movie collaboration between the director and Tim Allen. The Santa Clause was directed by American director John Pasquin, whom had been in the industry for many years, directing episodes of Family Ties and Growing Pains, and had also previously worked with Allen directing episodes of Home Improvement. And The Santa Clause was the start of a movie collaboration between the director and actor, as Pasquin also directed Tim Allen in fellow Disney comedy Jungle to Jungle, which came out in 1997, and followed by Joe Somebody in 2001, which this time wasn't a Disney movie but more of an adult comedy. However, Pasquin wisely chose not to direct the sequels. Number 7, filming location. As with many American movies, The Santa Clause was filmed in the Great White North itself, Canada. Despite being set in Illinois, the movie was shot in the Greater Toronto Area and Oakville, Ontario. And I swear, Canada has doubled for so many movies. But regardless, living here in Australia, I guess I can never tell the difference whether a movie is filmed in the States or Canada. Speaking of the scenery, there is a scene where Santa's sleigh passes the moon, to which the Mickey Mouse logo is supposedly on the moon, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, Disney is known for sneaking visuals into their movies, like putting Mickey Mouse's head in Tron, but I just don't know if I'm seeing this one. What do you guys think? Number 6, it wasn't a fun shoot. Despite being set during the ice-cold snowy landscape of winter, The Santa Clause was actually filmed during summer, and the studio which housed many of the sets apparently didn't have air conditioning, which took its toll on Tim Allen, especially while filming the scenes where he was in his Santa Claus makeup. Thanks to the bodysuit, facial prosthetics, and beard that he had to wear, he would often get so hot that he would have to take frequent breaks to cool off. And if that wasn't enough, his Santa suit frequently rubbed against his neck, which would cause him to receive a very painful red rash. Ouch! Talk about getting a lump of coal in your Christmas stocking, or in this case, a skin rash. Even his young co-star Eric Lloyd, who played his son Charlie, had his own issues, as while playing around on the set he fell over and lost several of his front teeth, to which for filming he had to wear a set of fake teeth in his mouth. Also, supposedly while filming, Alan would get so hot and frustrated, he would start swearing and using bad language, forgetting that there were kids around. I don't know why I find that funny, but I do. Number 5, alternative movie posters. So the main poster that everyone is familiar with is this one with Tim Allen in his red gym jams, sporting a round belly, implying Alan's Santa Claus transformation. There are several other versions of this poster, like this one where he, has his son in a headlock? Okay, well I guess that'll teach him. I like this one where it focuses on an aspect not many people talk about with the movie, the first Santa who falls off the roof and dies, which is a weird thing to focus on. It's like Merry Christmas, Santa is dead. This one is cute and has a fairy tale approach, where we see the Charlie character looking into a snow globe to see his father Scott's head inside it, making it feel less like a Christmas comedy and more whimsical. My favourite poster is this one, which has a Drew Struzan feel about it, where we get an adventurous illustration of Scott and Charlie riding the sleigh, with Scott hanging on for dear life and not looking too happy about this ordeal. It's fun, exciting, and well drawn, and I can't help but feel like it's paying homage to the Christmas Vacation movie poster. But all the other alternative posters aside, I guess none have become as iconic as the more simpler one of just Alan in his jammies. Number 4, release. The Santa Clause was released just in time for Christmas in November 1994, where it would go on to make about $190 million in the box office on a $22 million budget. Not bad considering it was competing against Interview with a Vampire and the Miracle on 34th Street remake, along with Star Trek Generations. Yep, it seemed that the joining forces of Picard and Kirk didn't get in the way of Tim Allen's transformation into the holly jolly big man himself. The movie got impressive reviews from critics too, with it being felt that it had a fun, magical spirit that was missing from so many modern Christmas movies. But as always, when a fresh and original movie comes out that just so happens to hit a nerve with people, can lightning strike twice with just as impressive sequels? Well, this brings me to my next point. Number 3, The Santa Clause was dragged down by not so good sequels. Say what you want to say about The Santa Clause, it's a unique and original Christmas tale, and I always felt like the movie was pretty self-contained and didn't need a sequel. But oh boy, sequels it got. In the form of The Santa Clause 2, which came out nearly 10 years later in 2002, and The Santa Clause 3, The Escape Clause in 2006, and neither movie was able to recapture the magic or flair of the first one. The second movie performed pretty well in the box office, and the reviews weren't too bad either, with the consensus being that it's harmless fluff. but just not as good as the original, whereas the third movie was torn apart by critics, and I think at this stage there was no more spark left in this Christmas cracker, as the movie was criticised for its gags and slapstick comedy, and would be nominated for several Razzies, and thus Disney wisely chose to pack up the toys and put the series away. I actually didn't mind the second one that much, and if you personally like the sequels, then that's great, I won't try and tell you otherwise, but to me they just aren't as classic or as memorable as the first one. Number 2, body horror theory. Despite the fact that on the surface, The Santa Claus may look like a cutesy movie that is good-natured fun for the whole family, bound to leave a happy glow for all those who watch it, over the years there have been many theories that The Santa Claus is in fact a terrifying movie about a man who, against his will, has a horrific physical transformation where he can't stop drastically gaining weight and ages into an elderly man, and thus many claim that The Santa Claus is secretly a body horror movie. Many have even compared it to David Cronenberg's The Fly, one of them being British film critic Mark Kermode, who said, quote, "The Santa Claus is Miracle on 34th Street meets The Fly." Yeah, he didn't like the movie very much. So does The Santa Claus display terrifying elements of body horror wrapped up in a pretty Christmas bow? Or is it simply just a fun film not to be taken too seriously or analysed too deeply? Well, as with all art, it depends on the eye of the beholder. Number 1, the 1-800 number controversy. An older version of The Santa Claus featured a line of dialogue that has since been removed and is not available in modern versions of the movie. It's a short piece of dialogue in which, when the Scott Calvin character is given a contact number by his ex-wife Laura, he sarcastically says 1-800 spank me.
1-800 spank me? I know that number.
So naturally, after watching, many viewers actually dialed 1-800 spank me because, of course they did, only to discover that, surprise surprise, it was a real sex hotline number. In fact, Disney got heaps of complaints from annoyed parents whose children had rung up the number and thus racked up huge phone bills. So in 1997, 3 years after the movie's initial release, Disney decided to cut the dialogue from the movie from subsequent releases and broadcasts. And to further show no hard feelings, they purchased the phone hotline and disconnected it. So if you have an old VHS copy of The Santa Claus that is pre-1997, then chances are you'll also have the now infamous 1-800 spank me joke in your copy. So that was my look into The Santa Claus, and it's basically a fun, feel-good movie from the 90s, which has gone on to become a Christmas classic. A fan favourite that people, particularly those who grew up watching it, get out every Christmas to watch again in order to get themselves in the Christmas spirit. Anyway, I'm Minty, and now that I've thought about it, the idea of Tim Allen turning into Santa is pretty weird. I mean, that's as weird and as random if I suddenly transformed into Bob Ross. Hi, thank you for joining me. This is Minty Ross. But first, I'd like to show you a very special friend of mine. This here is Burton. Isn't he just the most precious little doer you've ever seen? I never go hunting. The only hunting I do is when I watch Good Will Hunting, when it comes on the TV. So today we're gonna paint a happy little painting. But first we get our paintbrushes and we go... Sometimes you gotta beat the little devil.